I was only 14 when it happened. Just a kid in middle school, trying to figure out who I was, trying to make sense of crushes and hormones and friendship. I invited a boy I liked over to my house to watch a movie, something innocent, something so normal. But what happened that day shattered everything I thought I knew about safety, trust, and myself. I didn't even have the words to describe it back then. I just knew something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Years later, I would come to understand what it really was. And that's when the anger started. Before everything fell apart, I was just a regular 14-year-old girl trying to find my place in the chaos of middle school. I was the kind of kid who lived in daydreams. I loved writing in journals, sketching random thoughts, obsessing over music and TV shows. My world was filled with silly crushes, late-night texts, convos with friends, and doodles on the corner of homework assignments. I wasn't loud, but I wasn't shy either, just somewhere in the middle, trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. Friendships came easy back then, or at least they felt that way. There was always someone to eat lunch with, walk the halls with, laugh about drama with. The world still felt relatively safe. My biggest concerns were usually about passing a math test or whether my best friend was mad at me for not replying fast enough. I was still growing, still learning, still innocent in all the ways that mattered. That's when I met him.
He was in my grade, also 14, and there wasn't anything particularly special about him at first. He wasn't super popular or the smartest guy in class.
But he had that kind of charm that made you feel like you were special when he talked to you. He had a way of looking you in the eyes like he was really listening. And for a girl who was just starting to figure out her worth, that kind of attention felt magnetic. We'd talk between classes, sometimes online after school. He was funny in that immature way that 14-year-old boys are, sending dumb memes, cracking jokes that made no sense, teasing me about random things. It was innocent. Or at least I thought it was. I started to like him. Not in a head-over-heels kind of way, but enough to feel butterflies when he messaged me or smiled at me in the hallway. One day I suggested we hang out. Nothing wild, just watching a movie at my house. My parents weren't home, but that didn't seem like a big deal at the time. I wasn't planning anything beyond what I'd do with any friend. I didn't even tell anyone about it because, to me, it didn't feel like something I needed to explain. I just wanted to spend time with someone I liked. That was it. No big, romantic expectations, no hidden agenda. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was. Not because I made a mistake, but because I truly believed that things like danger or trauma or betrayal only happen to other people. I didn't have the life experience to even imagine what could go wrong. And honestly, I wish I could go back and protect that version of me. The girl who opened her door that day with hope in her heart and not a single thought that it could lead to anything. More than a movie and maybe a little awkward flirting. That version of me didn't know what was coming. She didn't deserve what was about to happen. And she had no idea how one harmless afternoon would leave a crack in her spirit that would take years to understand, and even longer to try and heal. It started like any other afternoon, warm sunlight leaking through the curtains, a calm silence in the house, and a part of me buzzing with nervous excitement. I had straightened up the living room earlier that day, fluffing pillows, and making sure there were snacks. I remember looking in the mirror before he arrived, wondering if I looked okay. Not hot, just pretty enough for him to maybe notice. I didn't know it then, but I was walking straight into a moment that would split my life into two parts, before and after. When he showed up, he acted normal. We exchanged that awkward teenager smile, and he said hey like we were old friends. He smelled like cheap body spray, the kind every boy seemed to wear back then. And I remember trying not to show how nervous I was. We sat on the couch with a bag of popcorn between us, the movie playing in the background. It was supposed to be just that, a movie. Just two kids hanging out, but something felt off. It wasn't sudden. It crept in slowly. He shifted closer. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the couch cushion just sagged weird. But then he leaned in more. His arm brushed mine, then rested behind me, then casually dropped to my waist. I remember freezing just a little. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to ruin the moment. I kept thinking, this is fine, he's just being flirty. Right? He whispered something I barely caught. I nodded, nervous laugh. My heart started pounding. It wasn't butterflies anymore. It was alarm bells. Then came the kiss. It was fast, rough. Not the cute, clumsy kiss I imagined when I pictured first times. It was forceful. Like he was trying to prove something. I pulled back instinctively, but he followed. His hands were suddenly everywhere. My chest, my waist, my thighs. I tried to move his hands away, lightly at first, unsure how to be assertive without making it awkward.
He laughed it off. "Come on," he said, like it was all a game.
Like I was just playing hard to get. I tried to shift away. He pressed in closer. He held me down, not with bruises or full weight, but with just enough pressure that I felt powerless. I was paralyzed. Frozen in place. My brain was screaming, but my body wouldn't move. I felt like I was floating above myself, watching a scene I couldn't stop. It didn't feel real. It felt like a glitch in the universe, like surely someone would walk in and stop it. But no one did. When it was over, and I can barely bring myself to type those words, he got up, laughed again, and made some joke about how we should do that again sometime. He didn't look guilty. He didn't seem nervous. He was completely at ease, like nothing wrong had happened. And I just sat there. My legs curled up under me, my arms wrapped around my knees, numb and silent. I couldn't cry yet. I couldn't even think. I was stuck in this weird fog, trying to replay what just happened over and over, like if I looked at it from enough angles, it would start to make sense. That night, I took a long shower. I remember staring at the tiles and wondering how long I had been standing there. I tried to scrub my skin raw, not because I thought it would undo anything, but because I felt disgusting. I didn't even know why. I just knew I wanted to feel clean again, and no amount of hot water was doing the job. The next few days at school were a blur. I saw him in the hallways. He smiled at me once, like nothing had changed. Like we were cool. I wanted to disappear. I stopped responding to his messages. I avoided him in class. My stomach turned every time I saw his name pop up on my phone. But I never told anyone. I didn't have the words. I didn't even know what had happened. Was that normal? Did I lead him on? Did I mess up? I convinced myself that maybe this was just what relationships were like. Maybe I was being dramatic. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't pushed him off. I hadn't said the word no. But I hadn't said yes either. I hadn't wanted it. I hadn't enjoyed it. I just froze. I didn't know that freezing is a real trauma response. I didn't know that thousands of girls feel the same way, confused, ashamed, blaming themselves because society never taught us that silence doesn't mean consent. That fear doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like dissociation. Like numbness that lingers for years. I buried it. I locked it away. I wrapped it in silence and shame and tucked it in the furthest corner of my mind. I told myself, just forget it. You're fine. You're okay. People have it worse. But I wasn't okay. That moment, that 20-minute span of time in my living room, haunted me for years. Not just because of what happened, but because I had no idea how to process it. I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have the validation. I had pain with no name. And that kind of pain doesn't just go away. It festers. It lingers. It changes you in quiet ways. I stopped trusting people the same. I second-guessed my instincts. I lost a piece of my joy. I stopped feeling safe in spaces that used to bring me comfort, and all of that damage. It started in a moment I thought would just be a movie afternoon with a boy I liked. That's how quickly everything changed. In the weeks after it happened, everything on the outside looked the same, but inside, I was unraveling. I still went to school every day. I still smiled in group chats. I still posted selfies and showed up to class with my hair done and my homework mostly finished. But I wasn't there. Not really. It was like I'd split into two people, the version everyone else saw, and the version locked inside my head, stuck in a loop of confusion, fear, and silence. I didn't cry right away. I didn't even fully feel what had happened. I just remember this low, sinking feeling, like something in me had been disconnected, like a piece of me had gone missing, but I couldn't figure out which one. I was quieter, more distant. I stopped hanging out with friends as much. When people asked what was wrong, I blamed it on stress or school or hormones. Anything but the truth. That the truth was eating me alive. I started struggling with sleep. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling, replaying that day over and over. I'd analyze every second, trying to figure out if I had done something wrong. Maybe I led him on. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe I froze because deep down I wanted it. The guilt twisted everything. I couldn't even label what happened. I didn't have the word sexual assault in my vocabulary. I just knew something had been taken from me. Something I didn't give. Something I couldn't get back. The shame made me feel dirty, like I had some invisible mark on me that everyone could see. I avoided eye contact with people. I pulled away from friends who tried to get close. I couldn't trust anyone, not even myself. I doubted my own memory. I questioned my worth. I went from being this bubbly, expressive, creative kid to someone who was constantly tense, always scanning the room, always tired. School became unbearable. Not because of the classes, but because I had to pretend all day. Pretend I was fine. Pretend I didn't feel sick every time I saw him in the hall. Pretend his laugh didn't make my stomach drop. Pretend I wasn't terrified someone would figure it out, or worse, that no one ever would. The depression crept in slowly. I didn't call it that at first. I just thought I was being lazy. I'd sit in my room after school with no energy to do anything. Music felt too loud. TV shows didn't hold my attention. I'd scroll aimlessly through social media, comparing myself to other girls who seemed so carefree, so normal, so untouched. I felt like I was drowning in plain sight, and no one even noticed. My relationship with my family changed too. I pulled away without meaning to. I stopped talking as much at dinner. I avoided conversations. I'd get defensive over little things, or burst into tears for no reason. My parents didn't understand what was going on, and how could they? I didn't tell them. I couldn't. The thought of saying it out loud made me nauseous. What would they think? Would they blame me? Would they say it wasn't that serious? So I said nothing. I carried it like a secret grenade in my chest, terrified it would explode if I let even a little bit of it slip out. Every day was survival mode, smiling when I had to, staying quiet when I wanted to scream, telling myself over and over, just forget it, you're okay, it's over, but it wasn't over. It stayed with me in the way I flinched when someone got too close, in the way I avoided mirrors, in the way I lost interest in anything that used to bring me joy. Even in friendships, I felt different. I had a hard time trusting girls who talked about boys like they were harmless crushes. I envied how free they were, how they could still flirt, still hope, still believe in love. I felt broken by comparison. I kept wondering, would I ever feel normal again? And the worst part, I didn't even realize I'd been assaulted. Not really. Not in a way I could explain to anyone. All I knew was that something awful had happened, and it made me feel dirty, ashamed, and invisible. But because I didn't have bruises, because I hadn't screamed, because I hadn't said no out loud, I convinced myself it didn't count, that maybe it was just a bad experience. That maybe I was the problem. That belief haunted me. It made everything worse. Because when you don't know what happened to you was real, when you read gaslighting yourself into silence, there is no space for healing. Just a never-ending spiral of shame and self-blame. So I locked it up. I focused on surviving middle school. I got through it by turning off pieces of myself. By staying quiet, by staying small. I figured if I could just make it through each day, maybe eventually it would all fade. It didn't fade. It just hid, waiting until high school, when everything I thought I'd buried finally came crashing back in ways I never expected. It wasn't until years later that I finally began to understand what really happened to me. I was in high school by then, older, but still carrying that same heavy silence in my chest. The memories hadn't gone away. They just lived in the background of my life, showing up in weird ways. One day during health class, we had a lesson on consent. It was supposed to be one of those boring check-the-box lectures with videos and awkward pauses. But this time, something clicked. The teacher said consent isn't just about saying no. It's about enthusiastically saying yes. And if someone freezes, that's a trauma response. That's still a no. I flinched when boys got too close. I shut down when a romantic scene came on TV. I didn't trust my body, my instincts, or my own emotions. But I still didn't have the words. Not yet. The shift happened gradually. My ears started ringing. My hands went cold. That conversation led me to therapy, real therapy, with a woman who looked me in the eye and didn't flinch when I told her the truth. It was like someone turned on the lights in a room I didn't even know I was locked inside. I cried, I shook, I even laughed bitterly at how long I had lived in confusion. My therapist didn't rush me. She didn't ask why I didn't scream or fight back. She didn't question my memory. She just listened and said, "I believe you." And those 3 words, they changed everything. I felt my stomach twist, and my heart started pounding in my chest. I remembered the couch. I told them about that day, about the movie, about him, about how I froze and never said anything. I cried through most of it, but I got it out. The depression, the anxiety, the shame, none of it was random. It all traced back to that one day. I deserved better. That 14-year-old version of me deserved better. At the way no one taught us what assault really looks like. At the way girls are told to be careful but never taught that silence doesn't equal consent. The fire to speak, to heal, and eventually to fight back. Once I started talking about what happened to me, it was like the universe began answering questions I didn't even know I had. It started small conversations with friends, pieces of gossip that had floated through the hallways, whispers I had brushed off before. But now that I had context, I started connecting dots. At the way I was left to deal with it alone while he got to keep living like nothing happened. Apparently, he wasn't just cheating on his girlfriend. He was lying, manipulating, playing girls against each other. Treating them like disposable objects, bragging about how many girls he could get. He didn't even try to hide it, the worst part. Most people just laughed it off. Like it was typical guy behavior, like it wasn't dangerous. And now someone else was saying the same thing. Not about some random guy, but about him. That one moment where I was stripped of my voice and made to believe it was my fault. It allowed me to breathe again, to sleep again, to start forgiving myself for something that was never mine to own in the first place. I barely reacted outwardly, but inside I felt my stomach twist. I hadn't heard his name in months. And said, "I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to freak out." She told me she had been with him, not dating, just hooked up, one night, no protection. He told her not to worry. Sighed, he pulled out, but a few weeks later she missed her period. She panicked, she thought she was pregnant. I had been doing everything in my power to not think about him. But now, just the mention of him had me on edge. And suddenly I realized I had been gaslighting myself into silence for something that had a name. A real name. A name that meant it wasn't my fault. Blocked her number, avoided her at school. Told people she was crazy and obsessed. She ended up taking a test, thankfully negative, but she was traumatized by how easily he just threw her aside. Like she was nothing. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he kept doing it because no one had ever stopped him. It was the overwhelming desire to expose him, to make sure he never hurt another girl again. The popcorn, the kiss I didn't ask for, the way I froze, the way I couldn't move. Replaced by the undeniable truth, he had a pattern of predatory behavior, and I was just one of many. I knew it. I didn't ask her to tell anyone else. I wasn't ready to go public, but part of me hoped the truth would spread. That people would start putting the pieces together. That gut feeling when you realize someone's mask has finally started to crack. I didn't say anything. One night, at a party, she got drunk. Really drunk. He was there. They left together. And afterwards, she confided in someone that she didn't remember everything. But what she did remember made her feel sick, violated, used. Just filed it away. But that was the moment I realized. Maybe I wasn't the only one. Some didn't use the word assault, but the pattern was there. Crossing boundaries. Coercing girls into doing things they weren't comfortable with. Treating consent like a joke. Ghosting them afterward. Making them feel like they were the problem. Every ugly detail. No more censoring. No more sugarcoating. I wasn't sure if I was ready for everyone to know. But deep down I think I wanted the fire to spread. I wanted the lies to burn down. I wanted him to feel just a fraction of what I'd carried for years. So I said, "If you feel like telling people, I won't stop you." I laid it out exactly how it happened. Voice shaking, heart pounding, but determined not to hold it in anymore. People stopped laughing at his jokes. Girls avoided him. Some of his guy friends distanced themselves, while others flat out called him out. The silence that had protected him for years was crumbling. She kept saying, "He did what? Are you serious?" It was like something snapped in her too. She said, "People need to know. This can't stay quiet." My dad looked broken in a way I'd never seen before. A few whispers. A couple of people side-eyeing him in the hallway. Then came the posts, subtle ones at first. Vague enough to avoid drama but pointed enough to start conversations. Screenshots. Guess who's not as innocent as he pretends to be?
TikToks, Instagram stories.
All alluding to someone with a dirty past finally getting exposed. They both apologized, not because it was their fault, but because they couldn't protect me. They held me that night, and for the first time since I was 14, I didn't feel completely alone in it. I had waited years for even an ounce of remorse, a sliver of acknowledgement, and what I got instead was deflection and gaslighting. Quietly, like a whisper I wasn't ready to say out loud. My brain felt like it was racing in 100 directions. What if it was true? What if that's what happened to me? What does that make him? What does that make me? I remember going home, locking myself in my room, and crying in a way I hadn't cried in years, loud, messy, and full of rage. He was the one trying to clean up the mess. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one drowning, he was. A part of me that had always hoped he might one day admit what he did, maybe not to the world, but at least to me, finally died. And what replaced it wasn't sadness, it was control. The way I said nothing, and how he just kept going anyway. That was the first time I let the word assault pass through my mind. Claimed he was being bullied. Told others I was making things up for attention. It was quieter, slower, but far more brutal. Because it was rooted in truth. And once the truth starts leaking out, there's no stopping it. But no one was buying it anymore. His old charm had worn off. His reputation was rotting, and this time he couldn't run from it. And most importantly, I felt believed. People were listening. Girls were coming forward. Stories were lining up. Patterns were forming, and he couldn't stop it. No amount of sweet talking or pretending could erase what was now out in the open. I knew I couldn't carry it alone anymore. I had to let it out, even if it terrified me. I didn't shrink. I simply said, yes, calmly. With certainty, no drama, no extra details. My ability to stand tall and say, this happened and it was not okay. Just confirmation. And that was enough to shake the ground beneath him. The rest of that day was a blur. I couldn't focus. Every girl who shared her story added fuel. Every person who listened without judgment kept it burning. It wasn't just sadness, it was betrayal. I had spent years thinking I was overreacting, that I had imagined the damage. That night I couldn't sleep. My chest felt too tight, like all that buried grief was finally crawling up my throat. The next week, I asked my school counselor if I could talk to someone. The first time I said it out loud, I think I was assaulted when I was 14. I broke. All the anger I had shoved down for years poured out. Through therapy, I started unpacking the layers of damage. I was angry. So angry, not just at him, but at the world. Eventually, I opened up to my family. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I sat them down one evening, my heart pounding like it was about to leap out of my chest. At first, they were quiet. Shocked, my mom cried. Talking about it didn't erase the pain, but it loosened its grip on me. What gutted me the most was realizing how many years I had lived under that shadow. How many birthdays, school dances, and friendships I experienced through the lens of unresolved trauma. But knowing the truth gave me something powerful, clarity. And with clarity came the fire. The fire to finally stop protecting him with my silence. And what I saw made my blood run cold. One day, someone mentioned him offhandedly, said he had started dating this older girl, someone from another high school. And someone added, yeah, they're always fighting.
He cheats on her all the time.
My heart skipped. It wasn't surprise, it was recognition. It didn't take long before more stories started surfacing. But then came the bombshell. I was talking to someone who knew his girlfriend, not well, but enough to have heard things. She said she felt like she hadn't really consented to what happened. When I heard that, my whole body tensed, my throat went dry. Because I knew that feeling, I lived that feeling. It wasn't a one-time mistake, It wasn't immaturity. It wasn't kids being kids. It was a pattern, a sick, deliberate pattern. And then it got worse. I had a friend, someone I was pretty close to back then, who one day pulled me aside when she tried to talk to him about it. He ghosted her. That's when I broke my silence. I told her what he did to me. Everything. At first, she was shocked. Then, she was furious. She kept saying, I knew something was off about him. And they did. Little by little, more girls came forward with their own versions of the same story. Suddenly, it wasn't just my story anymore. It was a pattern of abuse. A string of stories that painted a horrifying picture. He wasn't clueless. He wasn't confused. I started to feel a new kind of anger. Not the quiet, internal ache I had carried for years. This was different. It was fire. It was rage, but more than anything, it was clarity. All those years I spent doubting myself, all that time I convinced myself that maybe it wasn't that serious, that maybe I misread it. Gone. That realization changed everything for me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. I was one of many girls caught in the path of a guy who thought our silence would protect him. And for a while it did. But not anymore. It started with one conversation, me finally telling my friend the whole story. She was furious. Not the kind of performative outrage people sometimes put on. She was genuinely enraged. I could see it in her eyes. I hesitated at first, and just like that, the wildfire started. It was slow at first, and then it hit him. His carefully crafted persona, the smooth-talking, charming, just misunderstood guy, started to unravel. And he knew exactly where it started. One night I got a message from him on Facebook. It was like being punched in the stomach. He wrote, "Why are you saying all of those lies about me?" I stared at the message, my hands shaking. Lies? That's what he thought this was. Then he followed up with, "We were kids. We didn't know what we were doing." That's when the fury hit me like a freight train. We were kids? That's the excuse? That was supposed to erase what he did. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. No apology, no ownership. Just excuses and blame. In that moment, something inside me hardened. Because he was scrambling, he was panicking now. It was intoxicating. Not in a petty way, but in a powerful way. I felt strong. I felt heard. He had thrived on silence. Now, silence was no longer an option, and I made sure of that. Every time someone asked me if the rumors were true, I didn't flinch.
He tried damage control, started playing the victim.
Said people were out to get him. This wasn't the kind of revenge you see in movies. No dramatic confrontation, no public shaming. For years, I felt powerless, voiceless, invisible. But watching his lies fall apart, watching him squirm under the weight of the consequences he never thought he deface, that was the first time I felt like I was taking my power back. He had taken so much from me. But now I was taking something back, not just my voice, but my dignity, my sense of control. And I wasn't alone anymore. The fire I started with one conversation had become a signal to others. You're not crazy, you're not alone, and you deserve to be heard. And me? I stood in the center of it all, not as a victim anymore, but as someone finally ready to fight back. The truth was out, and for the first time in years, he was the one carrying the weight. But as satisfying as that felt, it wasn't enough. Not yet, because he still walked around free. He still had a phone, friends, weekends, laughter. While some people turned on him, others still gave him the benefit of the doubt. He was losing his charm, sure, but he hadn't lost anything that really mattered. He wasn't facing the full truth of what he'd done, and that ate at me. I wanted more than rumors. I wanted consequences. That's when I started asking questions, real ones. Could I report him? Was there a time limit? Would they believe me after all these years? What about the other girls? Could we build something together? A case, a record, a pattern too clear to ignore? I began to research statutes of limitations, reading articles late at night, scrolling through survivor forums, even watching interviews with women who had reported their abusers years later. And over I saw one thing: it is possible. Especially when multiple victims come forward. Especially when a pattern exists. Especially when it's not just about trauma, but about a predator still out there, possibly doing it again. But the idea of going through that process scared me. Courtrooms, testimony, doubt, retelling it all in front of strangers. I talked it over with my therapist. She didn't push me either way. She said, "This is your call, your story, your path. What matters is what you need to heal, not what the world expects." And that's when I started thinking less about revenge and more about justice. Revenge is emotional, it burns hot. It wants immediate impact, but justice? That's slower, sharper, it's long game energy. And in my case, it meant asking, what's the smartest way to stop him? That's when the immigration piece came to mind. I remembered hearing years ago that he wasn't here legally. Someone had mentioned it in passing back when we were kids. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But now, it felt like a thread I could pull. A way to tie legal consequences to his behavior, not just because of his status, but because of what he did while here. I spoke hypothetically to someone with legal knowledge. Asked, what happens if someone who's undocumented is accused of sexual assault, especially if there are multiple allegations? The answer was clear. If crimes are reported, especially serious ones like sexual assault, it can absolutely lead to deportation. But more importantly, it opens the door to a real investigation. It puts pressure where pressure belongs. I didn't make a move right away. I took time, thought deeply. Not because I doubted what he did, but because I needed to be sure I could handle the fallout. Not just for me, but for the other girls. If I stepped into the system, I had to be ready for the entire truth to come out. And I wanted to make sure they felt safe too. So I reached out to one of them, the girl he assaulted when she was drunk. I asked if she'd ever considered reporting him. Her eyes welled up. She said, "I've thought about it every day, but I didn't want to be the only one." I told her, "You're not." We started talking. More girls joined the conversation. No one made promises. No one committed to going public yet, but the seed was planted. The idea that maybe we didn't have to let him walk away untouched. That maybe together we could be the reason his story ended with accountability, not escape. There was an internal war raging inside me, that old voice whispering, "Let it go. Don't stir things up. Just move on." But then came the louder voice, the one that had been growing stronger each day. The voice that said, "If you stay silent, he stays safe. And he doesn't deserve that safety." This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about protection. Because if he did it to me and her, who's to say he hasn't done it again? Or won't do it tomorrow? Who else is out there, carrying his violence in silence like I once did? The fire inside me evolved. It matured. It became surgical, focused. I started writing down every memory, every detail. I saved screenshots, dismiss. I asked friends if they remembered things. I didn't scream it from the rooftops, not yet, but I was building a quiet, steady arsenal of truth. Because one day soon, when the time is right, I will move forward. Whether it's a police report, or a formal complaint, or triggering an investigation that ties to his status, I will do something that matters. Something that doesn't just feel good, but does good. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves silently, gathering strength, and when it strikes, it changes everything. Revenge got me moving, but healing kept me going. I used to think revenge had to look like destruction. Public shaming, humiliation, making him feel what I felt. And for a while that hunger was real. It gave me energy when I felt empty. But over time something shifted. Therapy didn't erase the fire in me, but it reshaped it, turned it into something clearer, more powerful. What I started to realize is this: the real revenge isn't just ruining his life, it's taking back mine. Every therapy session helped me put pieces of myself back together. Some days were brutal. Digging into old wounds hurts. But it also reminded me that I survived something I wasn't supposed to carry alone. And I did carry it, quietly, for years. Now, instead of letting that pain control me, I use it. I sit with it, understand it, and then turn it into something useful, something honest. I'm no longer afraid to say what happened. I own it. Even if I don't scream it from the rooftops, I carry it with pride, because surviving him didn't make me weak. It made me stronger than I ever thought possible. And with that strength came clarity. I wanted to help others find theirs too. I started small, replying to survivor threads online, leaving anonymous messages of support, joining a private forum for people who had experienced assault. just showing up quietly to say, I hear you. I believe you. You're not alone. And I started realizing how powerful it is to be the person I once needed. I wasn't ready to put my name on anything yet, but I was ready to speak, to share even anonymously. And every time I did, it felt like I was standing up for that 14-year-old version of me who sat on her bedroom floor, silent, scared, and unsure if what happened to her even counted. It did count. She counts. And so does every girl who was made to feel like her body wasn't hers. Every survivor who was told to stay quiet. Every friend who was ghosted after being used. Every person who froze in fear and was later told, but you didn't say no. I started to understand that revenge, real revenge, is truth. It's reclaiming your voice. It's living fully when someone tried to shatter you. It's standing tall in the light while your abuser hides in the shadows, afraid of what will happen if more people listen. Revenge is healing. Revenge is breaking the cycle. Revenge is using your story to stop the same thing from happening to someone else. And yes, part of me still wants justice, real, legal justice. I still intend to pursue it. I still want him to feel the weight of the pain he caused. But I'm not waiting for that to find peace. I'm choosing to rise now. I'm choosing to take back my power, on my timeline, in my way. He doesn't get to own my narrative anymore. He doesn't get to be the shadow in every decision I make. He doesn't get to win just because I stayed quiet, because I'm not quiet anymore. I survived. I'm still healing, still growing, still figuring it all out, but I've never been more certain of who I am. And now every time I speak, every time I reach out to another survivor, every time I breathe freely and unapologetically, that's my victory. That's my story. And I'm just getting started. For years, I carried the weight of what he did in silence. But silence only protects the guilty. Speaking up, whether through a whisper or a roar, is how we take our power back. If you've been through something like this, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not crazy for still being angry. You're human. And healing takes time. My story I sent to you just about what he did to me. It is about how I rose from it. If this resonated with you, subscribe and share. Because in the end, the truth is the loudest revenge.